Hello, everyone. Hoping we'll have a few more people joining us yet today, so I think we'll give it just a couple of minutes before we get officially started. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon. Our topic for today that we will be covering with the state and regional committee is conference planning for state and regionals. And I know some may have just rolled off of their annual meeting, some likely in the throes of all of the conference planning logistics. So hopefully this is a good conversation for folks. We have a variety of topics to talk through, some prepared questions, but really planning for this to be just a conversation for folks. We are recording this session, so please just be aware of that. And we will ask for folks to just feel free to unmute if you have a question or if there are comments or stories that you want to share related to the topics that we will be presenting. Again, really intended for this to be conversational for folks and an opportunity for us to learn from one another in that conference planning space. So it looks like we have a few more people who are joining, so we'll give it maybe just another 30 seconds or so, and then we will get into it. If folks could, though, as we are getting started in the chat, if you could share your name, pronouns, and if you could also share the state and regional organization that you are part of and what kind of role you play in your organization, if any. Like we've got a few regions covered here across the US, so that's exciting to hopefully, again, have that opportunity to share with what folks are doing within their state and regional organization. So if you are just joining, this is a webinar from ACRO's State and Regional Relations Committee, and our topic for this afternoon is conference planning. Belma, if you can move to the next slide, please. So our agenda for today, we just did some brief introductions there in the chat, but the main goal for today, again, is conversation. We have some prepared topics that myself and Katie will kind of walk through, and then hoping folks as conversation goes on, if there are discussion topics that folks want to talk through, feel free to unmute and share. We are recording this session, so for having information shared in the chat, we'll do our best to kind of read that out for the recording, but really encourage people to unmute and have the conversation that way. And then we'll end with a bit of wrap up and some resources for state and regional folks. So with the introductions for myself and for Katie, Belma, if you can move to the next slide. Thank you. A little bit about me. My name is Amber Salati and I use she, her pronouns. I am currently the interim director and deputy registrar in the Office of the Registrar at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. I am a member of the Upper Midwest ACRO, UMACRO, and in my time there, I've served as a program chair as well as the president, track and past president. And I'm currently the chair for ACRO's State and Regional Relations Committee. And one of the goals for our committee has been putting together these monthly webinars for folks to be able to have a space to have conversation on a variety of topics. And then I'll turn it over to my co-presenter, Katie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Brown. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the AVP for Student Success and University Registrar at Aspen University in Colorado. I am a member of RMACRO, the Rocky Mountain ACRO. I am currently serving as president, and I previously served in the historian role for RMACRO. And I am also a member of ACRO's State and Regional Relations Committee.
Thank you, Katie. So then moving on to the next slide is just when Katie and I were doing some kind of initial brainstorming on topics that have been of interest either to us or have come up through other state and regional roundtables at ACRO or things that have bubbled up through our own state and regional organizations. These have been some of the key topics that kind of continue to come up as those conversations go on. So we pulled those together as some initial kind of discussion topics for this afternoon, but you'll see that last bullet point there of and more that we would like for others to be jumping in with any other topics that are either top of mind for you all right now, and you want to be able to kind of pick the brains of your peers on kind of what other folks are doing. So the first topic here is related to conference modality. And either via show of hands or again, if folks want to put it in the chat or say out loud, what are folks doing when it comes to modality for your conference? Are you primarily in person? Have you explored doing a hybrid option? Are you only doing virtual conferences? Kind of where have folks landed now that we're, you know, out of the biggest throes of the pandemic?
I know for macro, Michigan ACRO, we were in person last year and we're in person this year, really no virtual options.
The chat we have only doing in person and another organization doing primarily virtual.
So this was our first one back in person since 2019. So we have made the transition back.
Gotcha.
I will also add that we polled our members and most members requested hybrid. But we ended up going back fully in person, mostly for logistic reasons. It was very hard to figure out as a smaller organization without a large budget, how to financially and operationally run a hybrid meeting. So we made the choice to go in person despite that not being the main request.
And I think that's kind of the sticking point for many that I've talked to, that the wanting to be able to have an option to be able to provide different modalities given resources that institutions have to be able to send folks to an in-person event, but then the cost on the organization side to be able to provide hybrid options can be challenging for sure. And then just reading out a few things here in the chat for Montana ACRO, there's a fall meeting that is virtual monthly virtual meetings, and then a spring meeting that is in person. So a lot of meeting. And PACRO will be in person, CapAcro virtual. I will say for UMACRO, we are in person this fall. We did in person last year as well, after coming off of just virtual meetings. So for those who are doing virtual, how has that been working? Have you seen any differences in the way that, like, from a member engagement perspective, are you seeing more people that are able to attend if you're doing virtual, or any kind of differences in between what you've done previously with virtual and what is happening with your in-person meetings?
Hello, everyone. I think, oh, sorry. Someone put something in the chat.
Go ahead. Please feel free to unmute folks if you're comfortable doing so.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Otu Obat, the second, coming from CapAcro. I'm the treasurer there. We have only done, since I've been there in 2022, virtual. So I do not know anything in person. In regards to how many people we have, I would say it's hit or miss. Sometimes we have a lot, like up to, like, say 80, and sometimes it's low. It kind of really depends on what we're presenting and what the topic is and who we're able to get in regards to, like, who's doing the presentations. We actually had Tiffany Robertson, thank you, for coming to one of our events. So when we have a power lady like that, or a power gentleman coming in our small little organization, then of course the numbers skyrocket. She's like a superstar when it comes to acro. So we appreciate of course that exposure, but that's what I've seen so far. Unfortunately, we haven't had anything in person, so I'm looking forward to when we start transition into person. Hopefully I'll be able to offer something different, but as of right now, that's kind of what has been going on.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
I see Virginia put in the chat that there's been more involvement with virtual meetings.
And for those who, if you're doing an in-person meeting, are you doing anything beyond that in-person meeting? I know there was a comment in the chat of having virtual monthly meetings and then in-person. For those who are doing an in-person meeting, are you providing any, like, reruns, if you will, of popular sessions after the annual meeting in a virtual format?
So we started with macro, and I think this started during the pandemic, just doing a monthly, we call it Lunch with Macro, and it's a virtual 1 hour, third week of Wednesday session. And it's been kind of hit or miss in terms of audience, but I have found that some people have joined and it's kind of gotten them inspired to get a little bit more involved. And I think that's actually helped to drive some audience to our in-person conference. And I think the people who come to the in-person really get a lot out of just being able, all the, like, informal networking and stuff. So that's been good. But yeah, we usually just do it kind of like this meeting where we throw out a few questions, topics, and just have a lot of free form conversation. I had not thought about doing a conference presentation. I actually kind of love that idea. So that's something I might take back to our group as we think about our conference. Will be in November. So maybe we could reuse some of those sessions if they make sense in the coming year, like next in 2024 at our Lunch with Macros.
I will add Remacro. We're doing this for the first time this year. We added to our conference surveys a question that said this topic should be represented as a webinar. And so we have our first one scheduled for September, and we hope to get a few more scheduled this year. But yes, we are using the content from the in-person meeting to create webinars and reach out to those who maybe couldn't travel to come to the in-person meeting.
For those who have done both virtual and in-person meetings, have you had any different like pricing structures for registration for folks to entice one way or the other?
We offered our virtual one for free. When we did it, it was only during COVID for a couple of years, but we did offer that as a free registration.
Similar with us, I believe last year, I can't remember, I think it was our conference meeting. We were supposed to do it in person, but we didn't get a lot of people. And then once we changed it into virtual, the $50 fee that was for the registration, we, made that free. And then we realized that a lot more people were able to participate virtually.
I guess for you all, is there anything that you have interest or any questions that you have related to conference modality? Otherwise, we can move on to another topic.
Yeah, I guess just to extend that out, I will actually be having my first meeting with my committee starting next week, but to Uchi's point, I've heard many people say, well, if it was cheaper, I would attend. So there's a value context here that I would like to explore a little bit more. We're not changing the value of what we're presenting in any way, shape, or form, but it seems that when you ask for $25, people suddenly can't find the time, but if it's free, they will make the time. So how do you counteract that in order to actually get member buy-in?
A great question.
Yeah, other than spending, an extra several $1,000s for an event afterwards that somebody may want to go to that has nothing to do with the programming.
Comments from others on that?
Maybe it's something we're all struggling with.
Yeah, it seems like
This isn't necessarily an answer to that, but we have moved to trying to be adaptable to everybody's needs. Like I said, we did that lunch with macro thing totally free. It's very low bar for people to attend it. It's low bar for the organizers. So that's kind of one thing. Then we've got a couple, we've got like a new professionals for admissions and a new professionals for registrar that's just going to be a one-day thing. We're trying to have them more like centrally located in Michigan so that it's not too bad of a travel. It's a one-day thing and it's $60, so it's pretty low and people can still go do a lot of networking, get some info that way. And then we're doing our conference, which is the 2.5 day thing. It's in northern Michigan, so it's a little farther to travel. It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but I think for the people who are really into it, it's still, compared to most conferences, it is pretty much a bargain. And so so the hope is that even if you're at a school where there's really not a lot of budget, you can find some way to get involved and then maybe be able to kind of build the case to move into one of the more expensive ones if you'd want to do that. And I should say too, if you go to the $60 one, we're giving you $60 registration off the main conference, which is an idea we got from somebody here when we were at the meeting in DC a couple of months ago.
The comments. All right. We'll move on to soliciting sessions. Does anyone have the magic key?
Does anyone have any best practices they want to share about how to get people engaged in soliciting sessions? How far out you start reaching out to people? or any carrots you're using to get them to want to present?
Yeah, to throw off that, Katie and Jamie Yarbrough can totally back me up on this one. We have a hard time because our conference is usually like second week of July, and most of the time a lot of schools can't pay for anything through the end of the year, so we have to wait till like 2 weeks out before we get a huge flood of anything. So it gets incredibly nerve-wracking for that, you know, last part of June.
So one thing we do for sessions is that we pretty much expect each of our committees to submit something. And that's one of the things that they're told like at the beginning of the year. And so they all work, we give them up to 2 slots, like basically like freebie slots if they have 2 topics. And so, so we fill some sessions that way, and it's nice to get some involvement through the committees. And then we open our, ours probably like June, it ended in June. So it was probably open like late May to June for a November conference. So that gives us plenty of time to look through them. Honestly, like we haven't really had to do much selection. Like it's pretty much what we get ends up filling everything. But we have noticed there are a couple of sessions that in the past have always been really popular, like legislative issues. Everybody wants to go to that one. So we've actually just moved to having that be a full conference session for everybody, and rather than just a breakout session.
And I can share something that UMacro has started probably more so intentionally this year than in years past is so UMacro hosts a monthly conversation, an opportunity for folks to get together on the webinar and talk about a variety of things. And recently there was a presentation, I think it was just in the July meeting that talked all about like how to submit a session, like some topics to consider for the membership. You know, when you're putting together a session description, what does that look like, to be able to hopefully ease the pressure on some members for being timid perhaps about submitting a session, and trying to really kind of ease people through that process. The other thing that they're doing this go around is there was kind of a call put out to the broader membership for UMacro to identify folks who either had like subject matter expertise in a particular area, or they were willing to serve on a panel or co-present with somebody, so that if there was somebody who's either newer to the organization or is a first-time presenter, to be able to match them up with somebody that might be able to then help them kind of walk through the process, present alongside them, in a way like in a bit of a mentor-mentee type relationship, but to, you know, to be looking for ways that we can get different folks involved in submitting sessions. We do have a tendency, whether it be similar institutions that are routinely submitting sessions, or the same people that are routinely submitting sessions, that you know, that can drive some burnout for those who are heavily involved. So a way to kind of, you know, match up people to bring in new presenters and new ideas and perspectives into the sessions that are coming through. So it's the first time that we're trying it this go around. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like once the session selection happens, and kind of where and how things shake out there. I know for myself, I was like, I'm happy to present with anybody on just about anything. So we'll see how that goes.
One carrot that we tried this year, in case you're not aware, ACRO has a best of the best scholarship, and state and regionals are allowed to put forth a session for that scholarship. So we kind of use that to help recruit sessions this year by advertising that one of the sessions would be put forth for that scholarship to win a free registration for ACRO in 2024. And then we made that also a question on our end of conference surveys, who would be your vote for the best of the best scholarship. So we did let the attendees choose who that person would be. But I think some folks maybe ended up presenting at our state and regional, partially in hopes that they would then get a scholarship to the ACRO annual meeting.
I'm curious if other regionals are offering either a discounted registration fee or a free registration fee for those that you select their session to be presented.
I know that's one thing that we've talked about at UMacro over the years, and we have not forged down that path.
And we haven't had that conversation as of yet, but that's a conversation we could have.
Tiffany also says in the chat that Illinois ACRO is not doing a discount or a free registration for speakers either.
I don't know, I'm very torn on the idea. It's great to have that dangling carrot out there, but I also think too, people may throw a random topic out there or may not put as much time or expertise into the actual presentation just because they want the discount.
And I'm also thinking, how does that work if their session happens to not get selected to present? Do they still get a discount because they just submitted a session idea? Or is it only for those who get selected to present their session that they proposed? And then how does that overlap with the registration? So they have to wait to know if their session got picked to register because they don't know if they got the discount or not. The thought makes my head hurt. The thought is nice, but it makes my head hurt as well. So
Yeah, I think the other thing there to consider is for depending on how many, like what your session tracks look like and how many sessions you have. And, you know, if you have one person that has 4 sessions that have been selected, is it just one discount? Is it a discount for every session? And, you know, I know this isn't necessarily the same for all state and regional organizations, but many are operating on pretty slim margins as it is. And being able to offer discounts can be challenging.
Yeah, I think I was weighing it against not having enough sessions or the struggle to get the membership to even submit a session. It has been historically hard for the Rocky Mountain ACRO region. It's just looking for other ideas to see if that has been experienced by anybody else, but thanks.
Does anyone find that their state and regional skews heavily toward either registrar or admissions? And if it does, are you doing anything to try to solicit sessions from the opposite group?
It's a great question, Katie.
And I was just
go ahead, Amber.
That is a question that has routinely come up in UMacro because we do skew very registrar heavy, and it can be challenging when there are admissions sessions that come through, but we don't have enough folks from the admissions space who are attending. So then those sessions tend to be have low attendance, and then the cycle just continues. But I think it's a way of looking at where our registrar and admissions spaces are coming together, and where there are opportunities to present on those topics that are going to be, relevant, whether it is like admissions flowing into a registrar space, or if it is, this is like a shared process that we have, or have some ownership in both sides, that looking for those opportunities. We've done similar things in the past at UMacro between the registrar and financial aid space of where our paths, either cross or we're walking in parallel. And those have been beneficial for folks.
Tiffany shared in the chat that Illinois Acro is historically registrar heavy, but she's providing lists of potential topics on the call for session emails, which includes admissions related topics. Remacro this year, we also lean registrar heavy, and we attempted to reach out to our regional ACAC, our admissions group, and see if we could maybe collaborate with them, and it didn't really end up happening. So we may try that again this year, or maybe other folks, if you have a better relationship with your regional ACAC, try reaching out to them too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
it's funny. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
say just to follow up on that, Katie, even in my own institution here, I walked upstairs because our admissions people are right upstairs from us, walked upstairs and said, hey, Acro's coming, and they literally, Macro's coming, and they literally said, we do our own thing, please don't ask us again. So they were almost very, standoffish to us wanting to participate. And, we're like, we pay the bill, like, we just want you all to participate, just come be part of it. And they were like, no, thanks.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we have been trying, the last couple of years, we've been trying to do relationships with the other ones. So we've actually gone to, I think it's MIFSPA is our financial aid group in Michigan, and then we have MACAC, which is the admissions. And we've joined forces to kind of give each other reciprocal registrations to the conference. So we give each group, they get 2 free registrations to our conference, and then we could bring two macro people to each of their conferences. So we actually did, like with MACAC, I think, and with MISFA too, we were able to at least send one person from macro to their conferences, and then we're hoping they're going to send somebody there and to ours, with the idea of hopefully they could do like a financial aid 101 and a registrar 101 type thing. We swing back and forth. Like when I first joined, it was all admissions people. Now it's like all registrars people, and a lot of it I think drives, like the board right now is pretty much all registrar people. So we're trying to get balance, but I do think it actually helps. I mentioned that we have our committees do it, and so we do have one committee that's really admissions focused, one that's really registrar practice focused, and so the fact that they're coming up with session proposals and stuff has helped us to get a good balance, even if the attendees aren't necessarily balanced.
Laura put a comment in the chat that PACRO has been registrar heavy, but she did add a plug. The state and regional committee will be doing a webinar next month on recruitment and admissions that Laura is helping to lead. So we're hoping that might generate some admissions and recruitment folks getting more involved in their state and regional ACRO.
I'm curious if folks are willing to share kind of what the most popular session topics or unique session topics you've had, either leading into this conference season or from previous conference seasons that others might consider to promote to their membership.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I feel like out of personal experience, the ones dealing with mental health and kind of getting over the grumpy at work tend to go over the best.
We often do a FERPA Jeopardy sessions annually at our conference, and those are pretty well attended. There's usually like questions and fun and candy being thrown and stuff like that. So people tend to like that, and it's somewhat educational. And then like I mentioned too, like our legislative issues, for some reason, everyone flocks to that one as well. Want to know what's going on in the state. And I think it's actually, that's a hard one to like keep on top of. I know I struggle with like national politics, state politics, whatever. And so I think people like it of like, hey, I just want to be able to go and sit for 1 hour and someone tell me what's going on rather than me have to figure it out.
I would say a big topic in the Chesapeake and Potomac region is dual enrollment and our whole Maryland blueprint that's coming down the pipeline. It's like a 10-year, 3.5 billion or 3.8 billion initiative that's going to be that is currently being laid out in the state of Maryland. So dual enrollment is a big topic of discussion in our conferences, or what we talk about on a monthly basis.
REMACRO is made up of 3 different states. So we generally offer one time slot of the conference is a state specific roundtable. And that one's always very popular as well.
We put a survey on our last year's, like I'm sure everybody does after their conference, a survey. And so we asked for some topic ideas that they didn't see necessarily or want more of for this coming years. And so like a couple of them were solving food scarcity on campuses, dual degree, how to plan for HLC visits, AI portal, Army Ignite, hybrid remote work. I think our top 3 attended sessions from last year was actually one from one of our vendors about, I can't remember the specific topic, but I know it had something to do with like some new technology that was coming out. That was very popular. Actually, one of the 2 sessions I did was popular too, and that was self-care. How to implement self-care in your everyday life. And I forget what the third one is, but we had 3 that had pretty high, the highest ratings of the session. So we try to reach back out to those who presented last year to maybe see, because sometimes it could be a part 2. I know I've done part 2s of my self-care session. I guess I might need to do a part 3 at some point, but so, or if they, are willing to present again on even another topic as well, but it's helpful.
Does anyone else have any burning questions about soliciting sessions? All right.
We can the soliciting sessions and kind of blending into programming and session layout. Once you have all of your sessions selected, how are you going to present them? I'm curious to hear a bit more about what folks are doing as far as their own conference layout, and are you primarily doing breakout sessions, roundtables, panels? Is it a good mix? Have you found that kind of sweet spot of all of the things in the way that they come together that has been successful for your organizations?
I would say, and our president is here, Dr. Gasson. Hello. So I don't want to talk too much if he wants to chime in, but I will just say that I know virtually, since we are mainly virtual, we do a group session where we all talk, and we may have presenters come and do what they need to do so everyone can hear. But then we have breakout sessions, and I know those have been very informative, and a lot of people have really enjoyed the different group sessions that they choose to go to. And then sometimes we come back, have a small discussion before we exit, or sometimes the event ends after the group session. So either way, I think they both have been informative. A lot of people have gathered information about it.
I'd say REMACRO does a pretty even mixture. of the various types. I think people are definitely more engaged in roundtables generally, as I've kind of peeked in the different sessions, but we do try to mix it up and have a variety of offerings.
Yeah, I will follow that up, Katie. I think it really depends on who's leading the session. I've been in a couple roundtables that where it was like pulling teeth to get people to make comments. But then I've also been in some that Katie led one. I don't know if you could call it a panel or a roundtable with like the first timers, a meeting with some of our more senior level staff, and it was a fantastic to just sit in the back as a fly on the wall and just listen to how it was being presented. So I really just think it depends on making sure that the topic's good, but the presenter actually can present the topic in a way that's engaging.
For those of you holding in-person conferences, do you tend to do it on campus somewhere, or are you using conference spaces like hotels or conference centers?
Primarily conference spaces.
Yeah, I think all of ours from at least the last 10 years have been conference centers.
We do hotels that have a conference center.
Laura says in the chat that PACRO does hotels and conference centers too. Remacro's kind of done a mix. We did do it on a campus this year. Sometimes we have found that that can be cheaper if the school is willing to give discounts, especially. But we did run into some challenges with space this year. The part of campus that we were on, there weren't as many rooms as we needed. So we had large rooms with air walls that we were taking up and down throughout the conference, and that got a little tiresome after a while.
Especially at lunchtime.
Yes. When people are trying to eat and we're trying to take air walls down.
Yeah, that's one thing that would be interesting for UMacro, depending on the location, because we rotate between the various states within our regional organization. But we also have so our meetings tend to be endish of October, early November, and having space available on a campus could be very challenging that time of year.
Yeah, we struggle geographically. I mean, Michigan's a fairly big state, although I know some of you who have multiple states to cover. I don't envy you at all, because I know we try to balance it and do like about half of them in kind of the northern part of the state, but it's challenging in November when we start to get snow and ice, and we're really struggling this year. We're in northern Michigan, and just to get any sort of like guest speakers, a lot of vendors don't want to come because where it's at, there's not really an airport, so you're just driving, and it's super cheap because it's the off season for the place we're staying at. But I don't know, I was talking to our board about like, can't we just do it in Southeast Michigan? And they said that traditionally, we don't do it there because there's concerns that nobody will stay at the hotel if it's because so many people live in that area that they would just come in for the conference and then leave, and we won't be able to meet the quotas for the hotel rooms, and it just kind of ruins some of the networking opportunities that are just spontaneously happening in the evening activities. So so I don't know. That's one of the things I'm sort of challenged with, of like, where do we put it to be fair? Because obviously the people in the northern part, really, they're always asked to drive like 10 hours, and but you know, I'm just trying to balance all that has been a challenge. So I'm curious how others are handling it. It sounds like some rotate around states.
Well, even that, Lisa, poses a problem. You know, we cover New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. There's correct me if I'm wrong, 7 schools in Wyoming total. There's just nothing in Wyoming. And then to expect somebody from Wyoming with a small budget to turn around and go to New Mexico. Ours is also in July, so we do it kind of in the peak of summer. This past time was in Albuquerque in July. Don't recommend it if you ever get a chance to go to Albuquerque in July. It is very hot, but it kind of comes with its own trade-off. Most of our member schools are right here in Colorado, but we want to be receptive to moving things back and forth, but it causes various problems. We go north and the people in the south have problems. So we have to be very receptive, but we can't, just stick it right in the middle of Colorado, because then we're going to cut 2 states out of the process. So it's a hard balance.
So for Illinois ACRO, we alternate years. So one year we're closer to the Chicago area. We're not in Chicago because Chicago would be expensive, but we're like in a south suburb of Chicago. Usually, like, we've been at the same hotel conference center for the years on that specific year. And then the other year we do one closer to downstate, even though it's really not all the way down there, but it's closer. It's about 2.5, 3 hours away from the Chicago area one. So we just alternate between those 2 sections.
We have a comment in the chat from Virginia. In Montana, we hold our in-person conferences on campuses, rotating various colleges and universities across the state.
I have kind of 2 directions to go. One related to first-time attendees, and the other kind of in just a general networking space. So I will put those 2 topics out there, and if folks want to chime in on either, but I'm always curious to hear what folks are doing for their first time attendees and kind of making them feel welcome and engaged with the conference.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
These are my fellow macro folks. We tried something new this year. We did a new to the profession panel that was it was geared toward what are most likely macro first-time attendees, but even if you're not, it was geared toward anyone who'd been in the profession for less than 3 years. So it was a way for those newer folks to speak with somebody who's maybe been in the role a little bit longer and talk about professional development and career trajectory and things like that, but then also network with other newer people. And we purposefully held that session as the very first session on the very first day, so that they could hopefully make a friend and they would recognize others in the rest of their sessions throughout the conference.
Yeah, again, piggybacking off what Katie had to say, we also do the little tags on your name tag thing that say like first timer. I myself tried to make sure that any of our colleagues that were new, we tried to give them realistic expectations as to what they're going to be seeing and experiencing. But just anybody that I saw that had that little tag that I wasn't familiar with, I went up and introduced myself. Just, networking is just a skill in and of itself, and I hate it, but I love it. So it's one of those things to force my own self to get out of my own comfort and, kind of get out there and do that. So I think even just having those little stickers really is just an icebreaker to know, there's that that can go to talk to that person. So I think that really helps the new incoming people really see kind of how things are broke apart.
That's awesome.
We have a first timers like little or at least last conference little networking, I don't know, not drinks or happy hour. It was like a happy hour, but just with some snacks and stuff. And then after that we had a fun event, like it was kind of a game, Family Feud type thing. And so we had like the new people versus the old people, and so it was a good way for the new people to kind of bond together, and then they had the rest of the conference to like recognize each other and stuff.
All right, we're getting surprisingly low on time. So I am going to move us on to the next topic. We do have a couple of resources slides that we'll save for the last 2 or so minutes, as they won't need too much attention, but good things for you all to know. So the last topic that we had on here was related to conference accessibility and kind of what folks are doing in that space.
I think I have more of a what not to do than maybe a to do. Macro has not been exceptionally great at this. We do not have ASL interpreters, but in our rooms this year, we did not even have microphones, which I don't think we realized until the start of the session. So that was maybe us dropping the ball. But we also had a lot of presenters who their default is, well, I can project, so I don't want to use one. And I think we could do a better job of saying, it's not for you, it's for the people trying to listen to you. Can you please use this microphone, even if you don't want to? So I think that's something that we could definitely be better at as an organization.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, Katie. And to add on, the couple sessions I'm thinking about, people tend to be very animated. So if they're holding a microphone, it limits the way they can it actually limits the way they present the information. So having like a clip on one or something would definitely be better. And again, it's not necessarily for them to be able to project it so that everybody can hear. And I think it really ultimately gets to the visual and the auditory disconnect there. So it's something we definitely have to work on.
I'm curious, is anybody using ASL interpreters or alternative text?
We haven't in UMacro up to this point.
That's
Or
awesome.
even- Yeah, I was going to throw it there too, or even providing English and Spanish handouts, or just having, UDL, Universal Design for Learning. Anybody go that far to provide any additional context for anybody who may understand things conceptually in a different language?
Sounds like a no.
One thing that I floated past our executive board for UMacro as something for consideration. We have a DEI committee within UMacro, and I had made the suggestion of whether it be someone on that committee or someone who's a part of conference planning to serve as kind of an either accessibility ambassador or coordinator for the organization, to be that person who can be a go-to for when it is, related to conference planning, and making sure that there is enough, microphones in the room, or enough options for folks of, looking into what that means for an ASL interpreter cost, things like that. Putting together a slide deck that folks can use that have, kind of conforms to some accessibility standards for folks of, all of our slide deck headers are the same font size and things like that. So that is something that they're taking into consideration, and I'll be curious to see kind of where things go from there. Other comments on this topic?
I know that one of the topics, or one of the comments that came up after the ACRO annual meeting in Aurora this year, if you were there, is also how big that space was. And how if you had any mobility issues, it was kind of hard to get around the hotel. State and regionals, we probably are holding our things in smaller locations, but I think that's also something that's worth considering. This year we had our sessions were all on one floor, but our exhibit hall was on another floor. And there was an elevator to get up there. So it was still accessible, but there was only one elevator to get to the second floor. So it maybe wasn't the easiest. And I think just space access and access to escalators or elevators are also things that we could be considering better going forward.
Okay. I do want to be mindful of time, so we will we'll move into our kind of wrap up and resource slides for folks. So we have a few different state and regional resources. I have a link there for the state and regional page that is on ACRO's website. There are a number of different things there. Particularly want to highlight the state and regional how-to guide. There is a state and regionals fundamentals course that folks can take. And we do have a listserv. It's currently a Google group that folks can join. Then there's information available about that on that page as well. That's where we've been promoting many of these webinars. So if you or folks that are in your organization want to get involved with that listserv, I certainly encourage folks to do so. We are also hosting monthly webinars the second Wednesday of the month in this time slot, the 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Our upcoming webinars, we have one September 13th that Laura had mentioned towards the start of our session today on exploring admissions and recruitment. And then on October 4th, we will be hosting a webinar generally on member engagement. Our goal really is to have these monthly webinars, again, as a space for people to connect. So if you have any particular topics or things that you are hoping we will bring folks together to talk about, feel free to reach out to myself or Katie. Our contact information is on this slide. And then the other piece related to the webinars and to our state and regional how-to guide that we are looking to, as a committee, make some changes and edits to the state and regional how-to guide of particular areas where we're lacking in information or information that needs to be presented more clearly. So we do have a survey that we will be sending out to membership to solicit some more of that feedback of what are the things that would be helpful to include in that state and regional how-to guide. So more to come on that. And then on the next slide, Belma, some ACRO updates. If folks aren't aware, the annual meeting call for our proposals is open, so session proposals can now be submitted, and the deadline is September 15th. ACRO Ascend will also have applications opening soon, and there's a link there for that particular program for those who are looking for a really fantastic leadership opportunity. And then I think the last thing that I have on there is just our contact information. Yep. So for this particular webinar, feel free to reach out to myself or Katie, or if, again, there are any topics that you're interested in and you would like us to kind of host a space for those conversations, certainly let us know. Otherwise, thank you all for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate the conversation and folks willing to share and engage in this space. So thank you so much and take care.
And we do have one last question in the chat about whether this recording will be shared. It's going to be put on ACRO's website on the same page that you registered for this session.
All right, thank you all.